Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark, I think. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. The World Cup's on.
The World Cup is on, Mark, yeah.
It's been dominating a hell of a lot of our time, I know. But what have you been playing this week? In fact, I don't know why I'm asking, Lewis. It's God of War time. It's God of
War time, yeah. Yeah, we need a new segment title for God of War Talk.
I sense that this will be very much like Elden Ring, in that we just talk about the same game for several weeks on end, but maybe just fewer weeks.
Yeah, well, hopefully one of us isn't still playing it 6 months later.
That would be good.
Yeah, just God of War, like you say, in between bouts of watching the World Cup, and also I was painting my living room walls all weekend, so I didn't have anywhere near as much time as I was sort of hoping to spend.
Exciting lives of Mark and Lewis.
Yeah, stupid being an adult. It gets worse and worse.
It's rubbish, isn't it? Remember you could just play video games all day and like that was totally fine?
Yeah. Anyway, that opens up a big can of worms. In the good times, I've been playing God of War Ragnarok. I think I've probably put another maybe 5 or so hours since we last spoke in. I think my in-game clock is saying 15 hours just now, so I have just completed a couple of quest lines. There's a kind of good chunk of story which I think you were part of the way through when we last spoke. There's another section where you play as Atreus, and I've now progressed beyond that through some really epic boss battles, some really fun stuff, and I think we might be at roughly the same point.
We are, once again, Lewis, remarkably at the same point, yes. So I was maybe an hour or so ahead of you last time. Now we are at basically the same moment. It is insane how close we are going through this game together. I promise everyone this was not planned, but yeah, we are at nearly exactly the same point in the game. It is insane.
Not a lot has evolved or changed for me. I don't think there's just been a sort of slow and steady build-up of this narrative, the different threads that are coming together, a few new mechanics, but again, nothing that's really felt revolutionary. Would you agree with that?
I would very much agree with that. Again, it feels like a very true continuation of the first game, by which I mean none of the gameplay stuff is sort of given way to what the narrative is trying to do and trying to be, which I like in a lot of ways, but it does mean that a lot is very, very similar to that first game. Having said that, we have now teamed up with, again, very minor spoilers. If anyone wants to jump ahead a little bit so that you're not spoiled at all, feel free to do that. But we won't spoil the whole game, definitely not. But you do team up with Freya a little bit in what we've just been playing, Lewis, which gives you another sort of side character, whereas in the first game, it was exclusively Kratos and Atreus. Now you're starting to see different people in the mix. Do you know what I mean? You play primarily as Atreus in some situations with another companion character. Sometimes you're playing with Kratos as another companion character. So that's a nice little mix-up, I suppose. But yeah, in terms of the actual gameplay, specifically the actual combat, it is very, very similar. However, I still think that we are just approaching the game truly opening up and truly starting to do different things, which might be ridiculous 15 hours in, but it really does feel, we were both just saying before we started recording the podcast, as if we are just scratching the surface, even 15 hours in. Not saying that remotely, by the way, that 15 hours wasn't enjoyable. It was fantastic, and in fact, the boss fight that we both just done was fucking awesome. But yeah, I'm still waiting for it to wow me, I suppose. Like, that's what I was saying last time. I have yet to be truly wowed by the game. I suppose that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I would say feeling pretty much exactly the same as that so far. Yeah, so some really great fights, some good twists and turns. The sort of, you encounter Freya again in another fight, and before this kind of team up moment, some great sort of emotional story beats there as well. The performances from both Kratos and Freya, I think in particular, have been fantastic, and actually Atreus and another character that I won't name in case it's a spoiler, fantastic, and really, despite feeling like we are still at this early point in the game and in the narrative specifically, I do already feel quite invested in quite a lot of characters and a lot of potential threads. There was a small conversation between Sindri and Atreus that hinted at some kind of side quest I'm sure will be coming, focusing on Sindri and Brock, and I'm really excited to kind of go down that route as well and sort of see this kind of wider tapestry of characters be explored more than we got in the first game, definitely, because it's such a great world. That's the thing. It's such a fun game to play, as I was saying last week, an enjoyable game to be on the sticks for, but it's also, you know, a world and a kind of lore and a series of characters who interact in ways that are really interesting and can be surprising. It just makes you want to be in it. So that's why I'm disappointed not to have had a bit more time for it. But the World Cup is also a lot of those things, I suppose.
Yeah, the World Cup feels a bit all-consuming when it's on, isn't it? It's only once every 4 years, but it's like everywhere.
It's
constantly.
4 games a day. That's the thing. I think that's unusual, but
yeah, maybe when we're into the next rounds list, we'll have slightly more time in our hands. But yeah, a lot of time watching football recently, ladies and gentlemen. But I have to echo exactly what you were saying there, Lewis. I think that the performances in this game are ridiculous, some of them in video game terms. I think that everyone is so strong, particularly Kratos. I mean, Christopher Judge is just absolutely fucking perfect at that. the sort of sullen old veteran there, do you know what I mean? But there's fantastic performances throughout. I actually think, oh God, I forget his name. The guy who's playing Odin.
I'm not sure the actor's name.
Oh God, he's a really famous actor, but that's really terrible that I can't remember him. His performance is great. Like, we've only actually met him once, but he was so good. It was fantastic. I love the take on the character. It was so good. But I think that a lot of, well, quote unquote criticism, which I'm calling like Twitter criticism of this game, is that like, oh, you're just like playing through a movie. And it's like, no, motherfucker, you've played no combat then. The combat is so fucking good. It is so enjoyable to play at every single turn. The story, the combat, everything. The puzzle solving's been pretty good as well for these sorts of things. But those two pillars, really, the narrative, which is exceptional, and the combat, which I find incredibly enjoyable to play, incredibly satisfying to do. It's a very, very good game. It has just, I don't know, like maybe my expectations are just ludicrously high because of 2018 and how good that was, but I've just yet to be truly stunned by the game yet. And maybe that's an unfair burden to put on the game, but I don't want to make it sound as if I'm remotely disappointed in it or anything like that. It is an extraordinarily good video game as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's got a high bar to clear in terms of its predecessor. It is still quite soon after. You know, this wasn't like a decade's gap between the games, so there hasn't been that kind of technical revolution that could bring a lot of that wow factor. It made its revolutions in 2018, and it will be interesting to see how they top that, but it definitely, you know, without being disappointing so far, it has kind of failed to, I don't even want to say failed, it has struggled to really kind of deliver me something I wasn't expecting to see, I suppose, up to this point.
I think that's fair.
But we're definitely heading in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%, man. Really, really enjoying it. Again, I don't want to sound negative. Very much enjoying it. Very excited to get back playing it. All right, Lewis, I think it is time for the news. All right, Lewis, we're doing the news slightly differently in that we're barely doing it at all. We have one news item and 2 shout-outs, and then we're going to do our Game of the Year predictions at the end of the show. The shows that we do that and always run over, and we never have enough time to talk about anything, so I wanted to give that a bit more time. And also, it is our friends in the United States Thanksgiving Day, or whatever it is, when this podcast comes out. There's no news. When Thanksgiving happens,
you better
the world grinds to a
There's
fucking
no news.
halt. There's no news. So this is what we've decided to do instead. I think it's a better use of everyone's time. It's a bit of fun, but we are still going to cover the main news story, I think, that's come out this week, which is news item number 1, Lewis. There is yet more news on the Activision deal. More developments this week. Firstly, Microsoft have apparently offered Sony a deal to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for the next 10 years, they have told the New York Times, although we don't know the conditions of that deal, if there are any conditions on that deal, and Sony have yet to comment on it. This also comes after Jim Ryan said that Xbox had originally only offered to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 3 years, a deal which he called inadequate on many levels. And it also comes in the same week that Activision announced that Warzone 2 has apparently reached 25 million players in the first 5 days. Again, it cannot be overstated, Liz, just how big Call of Duty is, or how much money they make, or their importance in the industry. They are absolutely gigantic. But just a few hours ago, Lewis, Sony have made a 22-page response to the CMA, who are the UK regulators who are investigating the Xbox and Activision deal, in which they claim that Microsoft's quote-unquote true strategy is to have PlayStation, quotes, become more like Nintendo and not compete in the 18-rated shooter space. They claim that Microsoft would have virtually exclusive ownership on the 18-rated FPS genre should the deal go through, and then they name things like Call of Duty, obviously, but also Halo, Gears, Overwatch, Doom. So they're not wrong with that claim, I don't think, but that is what they say Xbox's true strategy is. So, Lewis, yet more wrinkles here. Again, I do think that this deal basically goes through. I don't know if we're going to have any restrictions around Call of Duty now. That's where I sort of am, and I think that a lot of people, or ourselves included, I think we can safely say, thought that this would be a much easier process to get this deal through regulators, but I think that we've massively underestimated the difficulty there. It has also just come out as well, moments before we started recording this section, that apparently the next generation of console won't come out until 2028, according to what PlayStation are saying in this response to the CMA. That's when both them and Xbox are planning on the next generation of console being brought out, and as such, maybe that 10-year deal makes a little bit more senseless.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here as this news story trundles on forever. The 10-year deal, I guess, first of all, yeah, I mean, that you can see where that makes sense for Xbox, if that is the kind of timeline that we're looking at for the next generation, because then you're talking about potentially Call of Duty coming off PlayStation midway through that generation, and buyers are going to know that probably come the time that they're making next console decisions. But at the same time, as we were kind of saying last week, I don't really know what more Sony can expect in terms of an offer for this, if this is going to be done settled out of court, so to speak, by the two coming together on a deal rather than one of the regulators forcing something to happen. I don't know that Sony could, you can't really expect a deal for 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. I mean, it's just, that doesn't seem likely at all to me.
I mean, Phil Spencer said as much in that Verge podcast interview, you know what I mean, that he wouldn't ever write forever in a contract. And I mean, obviously you wouldn't. Obviously,
no.
Things can change enormously in 10 years, even 15 years, 20 years. But, I mean, I think that is a pretty reasonable deal, dare I say, from Xbox. But I think that what PlayStation want is a guarantee that the Call of Duty franchise will be dealt with separately, will be dealt with by effectively a different company outside Xbox, and will indefinitely be a multi-platform game. That's what they want. That's what they want out of this process. Whether or not they get that, very much up in the air. I highly doubt it still, but I don't know. I don't know anymore,
They themselves, I mean, Sony in that document, I think they even used the words that they are confident that the CMA will rule in their favour and decide that that the merger would be damaging, because there is a lot of truth in the points that they make, to be honest, around what that would potentially do to PlayStation's business, how it would reshape the market. And there was quite telling stuff in there about how Xbox's documents sort of suggest that they don't really look at Nintendo very much when they're doing competitor analyses and things like that.
Yeah, so they weren't involved in competitor analysis. It was literally only PlayStation and PC, I think.
Yeah, and like they're saying as well, with the kind of corner in the FPS market, that is significant. And obviously we've spoken enough about how important Call of Duty specifically is within all of that. But those games draw a lot of people into gaming, and if they're all in one place, that is potentially damaging. But at the same time, this is business, and I can totally see a world where it still all goes through as Xbox would like, but it does feel, I'm interested that Sony have said that they're confident that the CMA will come down on their side. That maybe that's just trying to nudge them in that direction, maybe not.
I think that might just be business speaking, the contract and the response or whatever, like they're trying to butter them up in some capacity. Do you know what I mean? I guess the question is, like, look, we both know, everyone knows that this is going to impact Sony's business. Of course it fucking is, right? That's not really the debate, to be honest. The debate is what right or what responsibility does the CMA or any regulatory body have to protect Sony's business interests in this deal. I mean, I think that's the interesting bit. And obviously they are lobbying for this under the guise that it would be better for the gamers, and I do think that it would be better for the gamers, to be clear, but I'm not sure how the CMA is approaching this, do you know what I mean? And if they ultimately just say, well, we have no responsibility to protect your business interests in this market, and therefore deal goes through, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be the way it shakes out. I guess that might be why Sony's using language around, the potential impact on the quality of game production and on smaller studios and indie development and those kinds of things as well. I guess essentially saying Xbox could just soak up all the money and become, a bad landlord, essentially, and not really bother about anyone, which I don't think will happen, but, that's the argument that they can make, and that might be the sort of thing that would force a regulatory body to say, well, it's not appropriate then for this one party to become so big. But who knows? I mean, it doesn't feel like there's any real sort of natural and obvious conclusion to this.
No, it certainly doesn't. And as I said, I think that we have all, as an industry, underestimated how difficult this was going to be to get through regulators. And as the weeks go on, I do feel less and less confident that this will go through without any restrictions. But I do still think that's the most likely outcome, if that makes sense, All right, Lewis, just wanted to add in a couple of shout-outs as well. I know it feels as though we're flying through the show here because we're just skipping out most of the news.
We should do this more often.
No, we provide a good product list and we will not waste people's time by filling up our news items with nonsense news stories. So we're doing this instead. But a significant game has come out, Lewis, this week, and that is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And holy fucking shit, do those games look broken and janky as hell. They're currently sitting with a 76 on Metacritic, and that is pretty underwhelming, and I believe the lowest for the entire series, potentially. Oh, wow. I did try and Google this a little bit, but I think that is the lowest for the entire series.
That's a big series.
And it's a big series. This is the first mainline game to venture into like a proper open world as well, and frankly, it's a fucking embarrassing effort. The game looks absolutely awful. I know that people might be saying like, oh, the Switch is underpowered and whatever, but there have been numerous open world games on the Switch that look much, much better than this. And Breath of the Wild jumps immediately to mindless. It wasn't anywhere near as janky or broken as this. It had some pop in, but that was about it. That was the only bad problem it had, and otherwise looked fucking gorgeous in my opinion. Pokemon as an entity is estimated to be the biggest media franchise in the world, and by some distance at 118.5 billion. That is 35% bigger than the next closest, which is Mickey Mouse and Friends, which has been around a hell of a lot longer than Pokemon has, and is getting on for double the value of Star Wars, which has also been around a lot longer, and is more than 3 times more valuable than the entire MCU. The reason I say all that, Lewis, is to illustrate the point that there is no fucking excuse whatsoever that they should be making games of this quality. They should be making some of the best games in the world, not fucking this shit shovelware for kids. That said, Lewis, they have absolutely zero incentive to change because this has sold insanely well, of course. It is currently the biggest selling physical release here in the UK, and I'm sure it is doing incredibly well in other markets as well, for a game that barely works.
Yeah, oh god, this is a mess, isn't it? It's I mean, I've heard people say that there's elements to the game, the actual gameplay and what they've created there that is good, but it seems to me like a bit of a wreck in terms of the performance and the look of this. It's some of the technical glitches are pretty bad, kind of funny often.
They're hilarious to watch on Twitter, but if I'd paid 60 quid for the game, I'd be pretty pissed off with them.
Exactly. I mean, it's just not, like you say, it's not good enough for a company of this kind of scale to be doing this, and it's just not really, it's not on anymore. Like, it's not like Game Freak or new developers or anything. They should have evolved if they wanted to go in this open world direction, because that's where the fans have been demanding they go. They have to know what that takes business wise and scale up and tool up and get the skills in that you need to create a game like this, and that obviously comes with significantly more investment, and it's kind of baffling that they will just keep doing this. But like you said, why would it change? There's no reason for them to do any of that, because they're going to recoup the money and sell another series of the anime and put out new toys, and it's an ecosystem. It's just how it works.
Absolutely. And unfortunately for fans of the games, I think that this series has become stale, like quite a long time ago. And I think that the open world is what they should do to liven it up. But this execution is, like, it's embarrassing. Like, I can't think of another word to describe it better than embarrassing. Like, if I was a developer that working on the biggest media franchise in the world, and that is the product I put out into the world, I would be embarrassed about that. All right, listen, quick shout out number 2. Black Friday is this week, didn't you know? I'm joking, of course everyone knows because it's marketed fucking everywhere. I want to reiterate that my stance on Black Friday has not changed, and that it is a remarkable feat of marketing and one of the biggest cons in the modern era. A recent BBC article found that 98% of quote-unquote deals were either cheaper or the same price earlier in the year, so you're just not getting a very good price, to be honest. I would highly recommend getting a price tracker for any online store that you go to. Almost all of them will have one. I would highly recommend the Chrome extension Keepa, which is Keepa. For Amazon specifically, they are really good, and on the actual product page, it shows you a little graph tracking the actual price of every single item, so you really know whether or not you're getting a good deal or not. That being said, there are some good deals out there. Good gaming deals that I think are good and that have also been banded about all over the place, but these I do think are genuinely good. PlayStation are currently giving 25% off any level of PlayStation Plus subscription, so whether that be Essentials, the extra tier, or the premium tier. They do stack as well, so basically everyone should do this if you plan on playing your PlayStation for the next year at least, because I highly doubt that you'll be getting it cheaper at any point. PlayStation are also selling the DualSense controller here in the UK, currently for 40 quid basically, and you can get any colour you want. And the Series S is also on sale, 60 quid off here in the UK, making it $189.99, which is a very, very, very cheap entry into next-gen gaming. And that is the cheapest that the Series S has ever been so far. So I think that they're all good deals. Don't rush out and get them necessarily if you don't think that you'll use any of those things. But I do think that they are legitimately good deals. I'm sure that a lot of that applies to different countries as well. I'm sure that these things will be on sale or at a discount in basically every country that PlayStation and Xbox operate in, you know. Definitely in the US, I know for a fact.
Yeah, just be careful out there, as Mark's saying, it's these deals are often pretty fabricated, and game sales generally, I think, tempt everyone to spend money on games that sit in your backlog pile, so maybe take a look there first before you spend your hard-earned cash. Definitely,
and the PlayStation Store, Steam, Xbox Store, the eShop on Switch as well, they all have price trackers as well. You can track the prices of everything on there, so make sure that you're actually getting a good deal and make sure that you'll actually play the game. I've stopped buying games on deals precisely for this reason, because my backlog was getting endlessly big when I couldn't play the games that I wanted to play in the first place, never mind get to the backlog, you know. But anyway, on that cheery note, on that PSA, Lewis, I think it is time for a beer, and then we'll be back for our Game Award predictions. And we are back with our Game Award predictions, Lewis. Now, for those of you that don't know, me and Lewis do this, twice a year for the sort of major award ceremonies in gaming, and we usually have a friendly bet whereby the winner will make the loser play a game, not as a punishment or anything like that, but a game that they might not otherwise play. However, since we started doing this, I have won all but one, and I think that these games have perhaps become a little bit of a burden for Lewis, and that's not what we want. That's not what we want. This is all fun, right? And I still think you've got to play Final Fantasy VII and Firewatch, I believe.
Yeah, I had actually completely forgotten that I had Firewatch to play, so I mean, that's not a concern, because I can just knock that out in an afternoon at some point.
I think we should do that as one of our PlayAlong games. I think we said that at the time to sort of tick that off the list.
And I still want to play Final Fantasy VII. You know, these games haven't become a burden. It's just that, like, Nier took up so much time for me this year when I could have been playing kind of current stuff, so I'm kind of keen not to get too bogged down in that.
Sure, I totally get this, by the way. Like, I'm not saying that... Also, this was... What I'm about to say was my idea. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have Lewis go first on every single category. And if there is a sort of toss-up, instead of me perhaps playing a bit more strategically in the past, where if Lewis chose something that I thought was a bit of a toss-up, rather than sticking a leg out for something that I thought might on the off chance win, I'd just pick the same thing, and then that category would be a wash.
Now we see how he won so often.
I mean, I'm just saying, I won a lot of them, you know what I mean, and tactics come into it. But what we're going to do this time is I'm just going to pick the other one. Like, if there's a 50-50 or there's something that I feel is close to a toss-up, I'll pick the other one every single time, and hopefully that will lead to, I don't know, a bit more even outcomes here, because the idea of this wasn't for it to be like a burden to anyone, because I understand I'm using the word burden, and it's not that you don't want to play these games, but you like have to plan to play these games, you know what I mean?
That's the thing.
There's an empty spot in the year here, and hopefully I'm not playing anything else then, and then I can play this rather long RPG.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly,
I mean?
exactly.
I don't mean burden in the sense that you don't want to be playing these things. I mean burden in the sense that I understand it is demanding of your time. I also thought that this would be a bit more 50-50, and it's not turned out that way. So here we go. Also, before we start actually predicting things, we will be missing out some of the categories. For example, all the esports categories, that is not our part of gaming. We don't know anything about any of those dudes. I'm sure some of them are great and some of them deserve awards. We don't have a fucking clue though. So we'll be missing out them. We'll also be missing out a lot of the multiplayer stuff, the mobile stuff, the VR stuff. That is just not categories we feel comfortable predicting anything with any real clarity. So Lewis, I think that we just get stuck in here.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've waffled on too much. Let's get stuck in here. Or I have anyway. Starting off with a big one, the absolute daddy of them all, Game of the Year.
So this is recognising a game that delivers the absolute best experience across all creative and technical fields, Mark. And the nominees are A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
I think that there is a clear two-horse race here, right? And there might be in a lot of categories, right? This is going to come down to Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. I do want to mention some of the other games here, though. A Plague Tale Requiem is a great game. Fully think that it deserves its nomination here. Horizon Forbidden West is a great game. I fully think that it deserves its nomination here. Xenoblade Chronicle 3, by all accounts, is a great game and fully deserves its place here as well. Stray is a good game. I'm not sure it deserves a place here, if I'm completely honest with you. I think a lot of people love that little cat. I think that's why it's here.
Yeah.
But in reality, this is between Elden Ring and God of War, and I don't think too many people would dispute that, because although we've not finished God of War yet, it is an extremely good game. And despite me rolling back maybe my praise for Elden Ring since completing it, it was an extremely, extremely good game, and probably one of the most impressive open worlds I've seen in a very, very long time. So I think that it is clearly between those two. Lewis, I assume you agree.
Yeah, I do 100% agree. I just want to point out as well that despite your attempts to make this slightly fairer in my favour, if that even makes sense, you've played 5 of the 6 of these games to completion, whereas I've played 2 and a bit. Well, actually, you've not played God of War at completion, I suppose. But
that's hardly my fucking fault, mate.
No, I just mean, in terms of coming into this, you've actually like really nailed it in terms of these Game of the Year candidates. I think there's a couple of... it felt to me like these nominees are in sort of tiers. Definitely Elden Ring and God of War are the two standouts. Horizon Forbidden West was an obvious nominee. Then probably Plague Tale and Xenoblade. I mean, well, I'm kind of removing Xenoblade from that. I just don't know enough about it. But yeah, certainly the fans of that seem to love it. It got great reviews. Stray does feel like the outsider here. I think it's probably on the list because of all the other games of the year, particularly of the indie games this year. It probably sticks out the most, not necessarily because it's the best game, but it's in a lot of ways the most memorable, certainly the most marketable, which I think in terms of a thing that is, these nominees come together through kind of votes and nominees coming in from different outlets and journalists and so forth, and so you can see why that would kind of rise from what is otherwise, there aren't a lot of other obvious standouts. You can't think of much that missed the list here that you would go to bat for, which is maybe just because Elden Ring and God of War are so strong.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, maybe Bayonetta 3, which I think is a bit underrepresented here, but I mean, ultimately, I think it's about right. I've been totally honest with you, I think it's about right. But Lewis, what is your pick?
What is my pick? I don't know which side of the fence to fall on this, Mark.
I'm picking the other one, just remember that.
Yeah, which, I think it's a straight shoot between these two. I don't think you can, it's just going to go one way or the other, and there's kind of no logic to it. But to me, I think that I'm going to say Elden Ring.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man, really?
I think I am. I think one thing against that I would say is that I think that the recency bias for God of War may well tip it, and I do think that big kind of cinematic narrative games tend to get rewarded well at this show in particular. But I was thinking back to Sekiro winning it in 2019. Obviously God of War swept the board back in 2018 against really strong competition similar to now. But I think Elden Ring feels like the more revolutionary thing still this year, and for a lot of people, it's a hyper memorable experience. Whereas God of War, so far in our playthrough at least, we're kind of saying so far so similar to the last one, and I wonder if some people might then give the tick to Elden Ring for doing something that we hadn't really ever seen before. But it feels like 50-50 totally to me.
Yeah, it really does, and I bet that the voting is very close between those two. Full disclosure, Lewis, I would have picked God of War anyway, so I will be picking God of War. I do think that the recency bias probably does play into this. I do think, as you rightly said, cinematic games like this get rewarded more, specifically at this award show. So I would have been leaning God of War, but if Elden Ring wins it, I couldn't argue too much, you know. All right, Lewis, then Best Game Direction.
So this is awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. And the nominees are Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Immortality, and Stray.
Now, I do think that we're about to see a pattern here whereby any category that Elden Ring or God of War Ragnarok are in, they will probably be favourites to win it by quite a distance, and I think that this one is no different, and I think that it is a shootout between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. Great to see Stray here. I struggle to think that it is worth this. I mean, game direction definitely wasn't its strongest point, if I'm totally honest with you. Lovely to see Immortality here, which is of course Sam Barlow's new game, very much in the vein of her story and telling lies. Very excited to play that myself. Not got around to it yet. I was hoping to get around to it before we got any discussions like this, but sadly not here. Horizon Forbidden West had really great game direction. It really, really did. I think that it's just going to be outdone by God of War and Elden Ring at basically every turn at these game awards, but I would actually say that its game direction is probably one of the strongest aspects of that game.
Yeah.
However, I mean, let's be honest, it's between Elden Ring and God of War again.
I did wonder if you would sort of head towards Horizon on this one, potentially.
It is great game direction and really very, very strong.
And I definitely, it was good to see Immortality and Stray on this. I think Stray, it had a vision and it kind of executed on it. I think that the direction was totally fine in that. And Immortality, I haven't played it yet. I did think about whether this could be a dark horse here, just because it's quite different from everything else, and it's actually directed in the sense that we kind of typically think of direction in terms of it being essentially cinema. It's about Hollywood.
It's an FMV game, so directed in the true sense of the word.
Yeah. To me, for my pick for this one, Mark, I'm going to go with God of War on this one.
Oh, Lewis, this is so interesting. Genuine, like, hand on my heart, I would have went for Elden Ring on this one anyway.
I mean, again,
this is remarkable.
Again, here it's an obvious toss-up. To me, the thing is that Elden Ring, I mean, it's self-directed in a lot of ways for the player, and also I think that the criticisms that we did have of it, I think, do come down to that direction in a certain sense. It wasn't paced out the way that we maybe thought it should have been. It was kind of baggy in points. It was massively overlong. It had its issues, and I would put them down there. Whereas God of War feels like, maybe a continuation of the past vision, which might count against it a wee bit here. But it sort of knows exactly everything it wants to do. It pushes itself in lots of different ways, and it's a real technical achievement as well.
Yeah, again, as with Game of the Year, see if this went the other way, I wouldn't really have a leg to stand on. They're both extremely well directed as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think that its direction is far more subtle in Elden Ring, and I think that the mere fact that the player knows where to go and what to do without having characters explain it to them quite a lot of the time, do you know what I mean, is just quite well achieved in Elden Ring. Yeah, I think that is remarkably well directed, to be honest. But so is God of War. Do you know what I mean? So is God of War. All right, Lewis, best narrative.
So this is for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game, and your nominees are A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, and Immortality.
Lovely to see Immortality here again. I 100% think that A Plague Tale deserves its space here as well. I actually think that Horizon Forbidden West, this is probably one of the weaker areas for Horizon Forbidden West versus the first game, if I'm completely honest.
It's interesting.
But I think that Elden Ring and God of War being in the category again is going to be one of them lists. Frankly, it will always come down to one of them in any of the categories that they're in.
I mean, I wouldn't count out some of these games again. Again, really glad to see Immortality there. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you had felt that way about A Plague Tale as well, so that's good to know that, you really think it was up there as one of the best narratives from this year.
Oh, for this year, for sure. It was good. It was really, really good. Relies very heavily on its narrative and really executed well, particularly by the voice actors and things like that as well, who we might get to in a little while.
To me, for my pick on this one, and it maybe sort of explains back to why I went for Elden Ring for Game of the Year, but best narrative I'm given to God of War Ragnarok.
Yes, because I think that, quite frankly, I think that this is a more obvious choice here, to be honest.
I think so. I think most people will be considering narrative in the way that God of War presents it rather than the way that Elden Ring presents it. In fact, that debate has sort of erupted online after the nominations were put out. We don't really have time to go into the merits and demerits of that argument, I don't think. But
yeah, it was all a fucking nonsense, frankly.
Well, yeah,
that's my opinion, though.
These are two completely different visions of what narrative is or how it can be delivered, and I think that God of War's is the one that most people find sort of acceptable and comfortable and enjoyable, which is no bad thing, but so I think the award will go there.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, full disclosure, I think that this is 50-50, or very, very close to it. Personally, I would also have picked God of War in this category, but I'll choose Elden Ring this time. Next up, Lewis, is Best Art Direction.
So this is for Outstanding Creative and or Technical Achievement in Artistic Design and Animation. And your nominees are Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Scorn, and Stray.
Again, very nice to see Stray there, because I do actually think that the art direction of this game was one of its stronger things. I do think that the design of the game was like really, really cool. Scorn, the art direction was the only good thing about that game, but it was fantastic. It was really, really, really good. Horizon Forbidden West, yeah, it was good, but like, again, it just feels so overshadowed every single time by Elden Ring and God of War, which again is going to be a toss-up between those two. In every single award category that they are in, it will be a toss-up between those two.
Yeah, I think you're right. Again, I only played a tiny wee bit of Scorn. Obviously, it's actually was the thing that was really drawing people in. It's nice to see it get the nod, actually, because unusually, maybe this category doesn't have really any major indie representation, as you might expect it. It's quite heavily about the big AAA games here. So,
well, Stray and Scorn,
Stray,
I guess,
obviously Stray as well, but that is published by Annapurna. There's a good bit of money in marketing behind that. It's a slightly different thing, but again, its art direction I thought was great. It had this vision of that world, and it really executed on that well. It was a nice. That
was the best thing about the game, was the world, like 100%.
To me, I'm going to go for Elden Ring on this one for various reasons. Actually, partly that I think it probably does have the best art direction. It certainly has, I think, more interesting like creature design than God of War has in a lot of ways. To me, the thing is that God of War and Horizon feel quite similar in their art direction in terms of the style and kind of what its vibe is. And I think that there's a wee bit of kind of Sony bleed happening there, because there has been times even when I've been playing God of War where I've thought about playing Ratchet and Clank. There's a sort of colourfulness and a lushness all over the place all the time that is great, obviously, but I wonder if the votes might split a little on them, and I think that Elden Ring stands out.
Full disclosure, again, I think that this is basically 50-50, this one. I wouldn't be surprised if it went either way here. That being said, I would have also chose Elden Ring had it been my choice. I do think that God of War's art direction is exceptional, but I do think, as you rightly said, a lot of Sony games like this have a certain feel about them, do you know what I mean? And I think that you're right. I do think that at certain points I thought of Horizon, weirdly. So it's interesting that you've thought of Ratchet and Clank, do you know what I mean? Because, I don't know, PlayStation just seem to put a huge amount of emphasis on like environments in that capacity. So yeah, maybe there is a little bit of bleed happening there. But full disclosure, I would have picked Elden Ring as well here, but I'm more than happy with being left with God of War, if I'm honest. Alright, Lewis, up next, Best Score/Music.
For Outstanding Music, inclusive of score, original song and or licensed soundtrack. And your nominations are A Plague Tale Requiem, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Metal Hellsinger, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
It'd be very interesting to see where you go with this list.
Yeah, I mean,
Elden Ring and God of War there again.
I mean, they are both there. It's not a thing that I focus on a great deal. I wouldn't be stunned in a way if Metal Hellsinger won, just because it stands out in a completely different way from everything else. I assume that Xenoblade has great music because all of these JRPGs seem to have absolutely world-beating soundtracks to them.
Yep.
But for me, of the games I've played and what I know, I'm going to go for Elden Ring on this one as well.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, I have to say I will be going for Xenoblade on this for exactly the reasons that you just mentioned. Very strong track record of good music in this game. It was very, very popular this time around again. I will be picking Xenoblade. I do genuinely think that will win. I'm not throwing the game, Lewis. I'm not throwing the game, but I will pick the 50-50s, and I do genuinely think that Xenoblade will win that. All right, listen, off the back of that, best audio design.
Recognising the best in-game audio and sound design, and your nominations are Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, Gran Turismo 7, and Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah, interesting category, this one I've got to say, because the sound design in Elden Ring, God of War, and Horizon is very, very, very good. However, as we say here, Liz, or as I certainly say here, the shooters, there's so much happening in the audio design that it is often the ones that win this. There's just quite a lot to capture there, do you know what I mean, in terms of an FPS and in terms of racing games as well. Sony doing very well in this category, I've got to say.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and that has been an emphasis of theirs as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Particularly with the audio tech that's in the PS5, it's a big push these days. I totally agree there. There's some phenomenal sound design in God of War and Elden Ring, particularly Elden Ring. To me, I never know for this category, and I am going to go with the old adage here and go with the FPS and pick Call of Duty. Very slightly, because that leaves you having to decide between the other four, which I'm not certain there's a clear and obvious. I would maybe even have picked Gran Turismo 7 next.
Wow, that's interesting. I will not be picking that. I will be picking God of War for this one.
Is that out of genuine belief, or is that you think that if you bet on God of War often enough it will win?
A little bit in this one, to be honest with you, because if I'm being completely frank, I don't know a massive amount about audio design. I've not dived into it a great deal. However, in God of War, it is noticeably good. And when you notice audio design, it's usually because it's terrible or amazing. So, of all of them, I think I noticed the audio design already more in God of War than I did in Elden Ring, actually, I might even have Horizon as a close second there. The audio design in Horizon was really, really good as well, but I will be saying God of War. Next up, best performance list.
Awarded to an individual for voice over acting, motion and or performance capture. And your nominees are Ashley Birch for Horizon Forbidden West, Charlotte McBurney for A Plague Tale Requiem, Christopher Judge for God of War Ragnarok, Manon Gage for Immortality, and Sonny Suliak for God of War Ragnarok. I'm not sure if that is how that man's name is pronounced.
A good effort, Lewis. Much better than I could have managed, so there you go. Again, nice to see Immortality here, because those people in that game are actually given like a real live performance, which is great. Very strong category of this, if I'm being completely honest with you, Lewis. Be interesting to see where you go here, because for me, it's between the God of War 2, I'll be totally honest.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about this either. Great performances across the board by all accounts. I'm really interested in the Immortality performance. I almost want to give it that, and again that would leave you with the God of War decision to make. I kind of suspect it won't get the nominations or the votes for it from the judges, but so for that reason I'm going to go for Sonny Suliak.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, partly because Christopher Judge has won it before. This is an evolution of that character. I don't know, it's a straight shoot. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if one of the other ones gets it for this, though.
Me neither, because Ashley Birch, despite the fact that our character has been given quite a lot of annoying lines in Horizon Forbidden West, like, her performance is excellent as far as I'm concerned. And Charlotte McBurney in A Plague Tale Requiem is, I mean, she absolutely fucking makes the game, frankly. But I do strongly suspect that it will be a straight shoot between Christopher Judge and Sonny Suliak. But maybe they split the vote and someone else does win, but I will be taking Christopher Judge. Next up is Best Indie Game, Lewis.
For outstanding creative and technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. And the nominees for this are Cult of the Lamb, Neon White, Sifu, Stray, and Tunic.
This is an interesting one, and Lewis, rather embarrassingly, for a podcast that lauds indie games, I have only played one of these games this year, which is not great.
Yeah.
However, I do think that one game wins.
I think so too, Mark, unfortunately for you.
Well, Lewis, I said I would be giving up the 50-50s. To me, this is not a 50-50.
Right, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I could see this category going in a few different ways. I'm picking Stray. I'm picking Stray largely because it's in the Game of the Year category. I'm not convinced that it's the only one I've played there, but I'm still not convinced it's necessarily the best indie or seen as that, generally speaking. Cult of the Lamb will have a bit of recency bias.
Well, Neon White
reviewed incredibly well.
Yeah, it had enormous buzz when it first came out, and Sifu early on the year got a lot of love. Tunic as well, like, it looked like a great little game. Maybe wasn't as beloved as the rest of them, but a lot of love for Sifu particularly, and Neon White when they came out, you know?
Yeah. So you're going for Stray as well on this one?
I am going for Stray because I don't think this is a 50-50. I do think Stray wins this one probably quite handily.
Right. Well, the next one might be interesting then.
Yep, best debut indie list.
So this is for the best debut game created by a new independent studio. Your nominees are Neon White, Norco, Stray, Tunic, and Vampire Survivors, Mark.
I do not know what Norco is, Lewis, again, rather embarrassingly.
I'm sure I've told you about Norco. Norco is high on my list to play. It's a bit of a Kentucky Route Zero like.
Oh, of course it fucking is.
It sounds really interesting. It's in the Steam sale that it just got announced because I got an email about it last night. And
okay.
I am probably going to buy it now on the old Steam Deck, assuming it works.
Well, I might have to look into that list. I might have to look into that. However, I once again don't think this is a 50-50.
No.
And I do think this Stray will be winning this quite handily.
I'm sort of disappointed to do this and give Stray the double, but I think it will. Out of those, Vampire Survivors has a huge amount of fan support. I don't know much about it, and I'm not particularly interested in it. But
I don't know much about it, but I knew about that as a game.
Buzz,
but I didn't know about Norco.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting category, but I think Stray will probably take it just by the numbers alone.
Yeah, pretty much agree with you there. All right, let's best action game.
This is for the best game in the action genre, focused primarily on combat. And your nominees are Bayonetta 3, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Neon White, Sifu, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge.
Now, this is a very, very interesting category, and I would like you to speak first on it, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, again, none of these are games that I've played, so this is based entirely on reactions to them. I don't think Call of Duty will win.
No, it doesn't feel like the category for it.
No, and also, I guess I just don't want it to win. That being plain and simple.
Also that.
I think Bayonetta is a strong contender here, obviously. I think a lot of people like Sifu, but I don't think it's going to be the standout, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles maybe. I'm going to pick Neon White on this, and I think that's a huge gamble.
That is a huge gamble. That was not even in my spectrum of things that I was going to pick.
I'm sort of assuming that your gut would be taking you towards Bayonetta, really.
Well, my gut says that, in fact, but I might just want that to win. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
as opposed to actually expect it to win. Listen, I'm going to go for, and I'm perfectly willing for both of us to be wrong here, but I'm going to pick Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here.
Oh, wow.
When that came out, that was lauded enormously, specifically by the people who are voting on this. So I actually think that might be a sneaky win here. I must admit, I would have had Neon White last of all those games. I think that there's a good chance that Sifu wins this as well. But yeah, so Neon White versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in what I think is a pretty open category.
Yeah, I definitely think that, yeah.
All right, Lewis, best action adventure game.
This is for the best action adventure game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving. And your nominees are Plague Tale Requiem, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, Stray, and Tunic.
Again, a very interesting category, but because that category has God of War Ragnarok in it, I strongly suspect that will win.
Yeah, I'm picking God of War on this one. It's the standout, definitely.
Again, the 50-50s, I'm more than happy to go for the other one, but the obvious ones, it will be God of War.
Oh, it's all unraveling now, Mark.
It's not unraveling, it's just, I said for the 50-50s, that is the 50-50s. God of War is the clear winner there as far as I'm concerned. Next up, best RPG, Lewis.
For the best game designed with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences. And your nominations are Elden Ring, Live Alive, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Triangle Strategy, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
This one is slightly more interesting to me, but again, I do sort of feel that Elden Ring is bound to win this.
Yeah, I can see that some people might judge it not a pure RPG in the way that like a JRPG is, quite a different format to that, and that might mean that some votes go elsewhere, but yeah, I'm picking Elden Ring. It's also the only one here that I know a great deal about, if I'm being totally honest.
I would love Alive Alive to win this, but I think that's just me. I do think the Elden Ring is the clear winner here, to be honest with you. The closest one's probably Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and it's probably not that close, if I'm totally honest. Next up is Best Fighting Game, Lewis.
For the best game designed primarily around head-to-head combat, and your nominations are DNF Duel, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, The King of Fighters 15, Multiverses, and Sifu.
This one is quite interesting because I do think this is a 50-50, but I'll let you decide what two it's a 50-50 between.
Well, funnily enough, I've got two highlighted on my notes that I was deciding between, basically, and that is Multiverses and Sifu.
Definitely, yeah, 100%.
I mean, yeah, I don't
what
know.
What one do you want?
I think I'm going to go Multiverses on this one. I'm intrigued that Sifu is on that list. It's not a traditional fighting game in the way people imagine fighting games, which is great, but I think Multiverses is probably going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, if I were left to pick this, I would have picked Multiverses as well. However, I think it's a close enough 50-50 that I'll go the other one on that, so I'll go for Sifu.
Fair enough.
After that, Best Family Game, Lewis.
For the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform.
Otherwise known as the Nintendo category.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Your nominees are Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, Nintendo Switch Sports, and Splatoon 3.
Again, I feel like this is 50-50, but I'll let you decide what between.
I think it's pretty wide open, to be honest. I think all of these games are kind of a similar level. I'm picking Kirby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one.
Did you have a completely different 50-50?
Yeah, that wasn't even one of them.
What was your 50-50?
Rabbids in Splatoon 3.
Interesting. I'm not sure.
I mean, do what you want with that.
3.
Do you want with that information?
Yeah.
But that was my 50-50.
I think all of them bar Switch Sports could win, to be honest. Like, I don't think there's much to choose between them even.
I would be quite surprised if Switch Sports or the Lego Star Wars Saga won. Not saying that they don't deserve to be here or anything like that. I would then put Kirby above that, but to be honest with you, I think Sparks of Hope and Splatoon 3 are a cut above, if I'm honest.
Kirby reviewed really well, has a lot of big
Lewis,
fans.
Don't let
there.
me influence your decision. If that's what you want to go for,
I'm not changing it. I'm not changing it. Yeah.
Right, well, that leaves me for a decision. I was thought this one was going to be easy because you're doing a decision for me. But, okay, let's go Splatoon 3. Not feeling massively confident on that, to be totally honest, but because it is quite an open category. But it was, for me, between Sparks of Hope and Splatoon 3. After that, let's best racing/sports game. Have no idea why they continue to be the same category.
For the best traditional and non-traditional sports and racing game, and your nominations are F1 22, FIFA 23, NBA 2K23, Gran Turismo 7, and Ollie Ollie World.
Be interesting to see where you go here, Liz, I've got to admit.
I kind of dithered about this one as well. I just don't know a great deal about the genre anymore. I'm picking Gran Turismo 7. Didn't feel like it hit the heights that it maybe should have.
No.
But yeah, it's the standout there as being not a small game and also not a yearly franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, just based on the people who are voting on this, I'm going to choose the NBA game because most of them are going to be American. Because I really don't think that GTA 7 was lauded all that much, and I sort of think that this is a bit of an open category, so I'm perfectly willing to go for another one here, basically. But
interesting, yeah.
Fully willing to be wrong.
I just never know if those games have been dumped on or whatever. So.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, it very well might have been. I was strongly thinking about going for F1 2022 as well, just because I know that those games have reviewed pretty well in the past, but I think that one actually reviewed quite badly.
Yeah,
I do think ultimately GTA 7 wins this. I would have picked it if it wasn't for you, but I do think it's open enough for me to go for something else, so there we have it. After that, Lewis, was best sim/strategy game.
Best game focused on real-time or turn-based simulation or strategy gameplay irrespective of platform. Nominations for this are Dune Spice Wars, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, Total War Warhammer 3, 2 Point Campus, and Victoria 3, which I've never heard of, actually.
I have never heard of Victoria 3 either, perhaps shown our ignorance here. Again, Lewis, it'll be quite interesting to see where you go here. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure I realised that Dune was out. I should first say. Might need to go and double check that. I'm picking Mario plus Rabbids for this. I think it's
I think that's most likely, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't be stunned if it's not actually the best strategy game on this list, but it will be the one that wins the most votes from this panel. You know?
I also strongly suspect that. Is this 50-50 enough for me to pick something else?
What would your 50-50 be? To be honest, I'm not sure it is, but I mean,
I'm not sure it is either, if I'm totally honest. But I
think the only way something else wins this is if a lot of voters don't do this category because they don't know it, if you know what I mean, and it is left to the purists.
I'm going for Warhammer 3. There we are.
He's done it. Okay.
I've put it out there. I don't feel great about it at all.
No.
But here we are. So, Lewis, we did miss out a few categories there, I do have to say. So that concludes our predictions. But we did miss out a few categories there. Just a couple that I wanted to highlight. Firstly, Games for Impact. And maybe you could just read the nominations for these. But Games for Impact and Innovation and Accessibility.
So your nominees for Games for Impact, which is for a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message, are A Memoir Blue, As Dusk Falls, Citizen Sleeper, Endling Extinction is Forever, Hindsight, and I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. some great names in the category this year.
Definitely, but slightly embarrassingly, Lewis, and this is a category that I think that we normally have played quite a lot of the games in, but none this year for either of us, so that's not great. But I will definitely be checking out those games, certainly. I think the only one that I really know about, two, is As Dusk Falls and Citizen Sleeper I've definitely heard of as well. So I'll maybe need to look into the rest, but definitely games to look into, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. It's a list of games to go and check out for me because, too many of them this year we don't know very much about, so well worth looking into. And your nominees for Innovation and Accessibility, which is recognising software and or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience. Your nominations for this are As Dusk Falls, God of War, Ragnarok, Returnal, Return to Monkey Island, The Last of Us Part 1 and The Quarry.
Yeah, again, this is just a great category. I love that we are highlighting here games that are inclusive and provide accessibility options so that everyone can play, despite the fact that some people might need a little extra help in their gaming experience to enjoy it the same way that everyone else does. You know what I mean? I think that it's great that PlayStation have done so well in this category as well, particularly God of War, The Last of Us Part 1 as well. They've both done
Returnal as well, yeah.
Extraordinarily well, yeah, Returnal as well, but I think those two in particular have done like a lot and really sort of pushing forward. As This Falls as well from Microsoft, they've obviously done a huge amount as well with their adaptive controller and things like that they had for accessibility. It's just great that this continues to be highlighted because I do think that it's important, and I think that a lot of people just think that, well, if you've got a disability, then it's such a niche and whatever, and why do we need to bother about this? But like, if you're planning on playing games a lot later in life, suddenly a lot of this stuff might become important to you. So it's very, very good that it's here for a lot of people, because I don't want to stop playing games anytime soon. So if options like this make it more available to more people of more ages and more backgrounds and people with disabilities, it's just fantastic. And I just love that this award is here, you know?
Yeah, it's so important that it is here, absolutely. And yeah, just a massive sort of congratulations to all the games nominated. It's getting better and better. You know, this category was first introduced a few years ago, and that, I think the first year, it was maybe the year The Last of Us Part 2 came out.
Very possible,
and it was like so clearly a cut above everything else, and you can see how quickly already the industry is moving forward on this and making this such a big part of it. And it was been such a big part of the conversation around God of War, even around launch, because people are using those settings even just to modify difficulty if it's not particularly connected to a disability. You know, it's just like, this is a range of options to make games playable for anyone, and that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it a lot. All right, Liz, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It really does mean a huge amount to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Stories Untold. This by No Code, local boys here in Glasgow, Lewis, that have just been awarded, or have just been given the opportunity, should I say, to do a new Silent Hill game. So this will be us diving into that studio a little bit with our first game, Stories Untold, and then we'll be doing Observation after that, which got a lot more lauded, we will say. But very excited to dive into this one.
Yeah, I've actually played the first episode now.
Sweet.
The game's divided up into 24 completely unrelated as far as I can tell so far episodes, and I played the first one. It's kind of text adventure, interesting. Can't wait to speak to you about it when we get around to it, which will be just next week actually.
Indeed.
So time to get through it, but it's a really short game.
Nice one, man. I'm very much looking forward to getting stuck into it. Very interested in the concept above anything else. Very excited to play it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.